Have you ever noticed that the people with the least money seem to pay the most to exist? I'm not just talking about taxes here. I'm talking about the entire cost of being poor in America. Here's what nobody tells you. Poor people pay more for the same car, they pay more for the same furniture, they pay more for basic banking, they pay more in taxes as a percentage of their income, and they pay way more in what I call life penalties. Here at Simple Money, we've spent years studying how money actually works for everyday people. And today, I'm going to reveal something that will completely change how you see the financial system. The poorest Americans are trapped in what I call the poverty tax system, and it's costing them thousands of dollars every single year. Here's what's really happening. Imagine two people. Sarah makes $30,000 a year working retail. Michael makes $300,000 a year as a doctor. Now, conventional wisdom says Michael pays way more in taxes, right? He's in a higher tax bracket. He probably pays six figures in taxes every year. And that's technically true. But here's the part nobody talks about. Sarah pays a much higher percentage of her income just to survive. When you add up all the hidden costs, all the penalties, all the ways the system extracts money from people who don't have it, Sarah's getting destroyed. Think about it this way. Sarah pays $15 to cash her paycheck because she doesn't have a bank account. Michael gets free checking and earns interest on his deposits. Sarah pays $200 in overdraft fees this year because her account balance is always close to zero. Michael has never paid an overdraft fee in his life. Sarah buys a used car at 23% interest because her credit score is low. Michael gets a new car at 2% interest. Sarah rents furniture and pays 3 times what it's worth over 2 years. Michael buys furniture outright and uses it for a decade. Sarah pays $50 to get her tax return filed at a strip mall tax place. Michael has a CPA who finds thousands in deductions. This isn't just about being poor. It's about how expensive it is to be poor. And when you add it all up, the math is absolutely brutal. Let me break down the 5 ways poor people pay the most, starting with what I call the access tax. The access tax is what you pay just to participate in the basic financial system. If you don't have enough money to maintain a minimum balance, banks charge you for having an account. They charge you for using your own money. They charge you for not having enough money. Let's get specific here. The average monthly maintenance fee for a checking account is $12. That's $144 a year just to have a place to put your paycheck. But it gets worse. If you can't afford a bank account at all, you're paying check cashing places. They typically charge 1 to 3% of your check amount. On a $30,000 annual income, that's $300 to $900 a year just to access your own wages. Here's why this matters. Michael, our doctor, doesn't even think about this. His bank pays him to keep his money there. He earns interest. He gets free ATM withdrawals. He gets travel insurance on his credit card. He gets cash back on purchases. Sarah pays for the privilege of being a customer. The psychology here is insidious. We tell poor people they need to be more responsible with money, but the system charges them hundreds of dollars a year before they even start making financial decisions. It's like asking someone to run a race while carrying a backpack full of rocks, then wondering why they're not winning. The second way is what I call the credit penalty. This one is particularly cruel because it compounds over time. When you don't have money, you often need to borrow it. But here's the trap. The less money you have, the more expensive it is to borrow. Sarah needs a car to get to work. She has a credit score of 580 because she missed some payments when she was laid off last year. The dealer offers her a used Honda Accord at 23% interest. Her payment is $450 a month for 5 years. Total cost, $27,000 for an $11,000 car. Michael buys a new Tesla at 2.9% interest. Better car, lower interest rate. Why? Because he has money. But it's not just cars. Sarah's credit card charges her 29% interest. Michael's charges 12%. Sarah pays a security deposit for her apartment. Michael doesn't. Sarah pays higher insurance premiums. Michael gets discounts for bundling. Here's what makes this even more insidious. Poor people are mathematically riskier to lend to. I get it. They have less cushion, they're more likely to default. So from a pure business perspective, higher interest rates make sense. But the result is a poverty trap. The people who most need affordable credit are the ones who can least afford expensive credit. And expensive credit keeps them poor. It's a brutal cycle. Low income leads to poor credit leads to high interest rates drain your income, lower income leads to worse credit. Think about it this way. Sarah pays an extra $400 a month in interest compared to what Michael would pay for the same car. That's $4,800 a year. That's 16% of her gross income going to interest. For Michael, even his more expensive car payment is barely 3% of his income. The third way is the emergency premium. This is what you pay because you can't afford to plan ahead. When you have money, you can buy in bulk, you can wait for sales, you can invest in quality items that last longer, you can handle small problems before they become expensive disasters. When you don't have money, everything costs more. Sarah's car needs new brakes. It's a $300 repair, but she doesn't have $300, so she waits. 2 months later, the brake pads are completely gone. Now the rotors are damaged. The repair is $800. She still doesn't have $800. So she puts it on a credit card at 29% interest, total cost over $1,000 for a repair that should have been $300. Michael's car needs new brakes. He schedules it immediately. $300, done. Or think about buying groceries. Michael drives to Costco once a month. He buys a giant pack of toilet paper for $25. That's 48 rolls. It lasts him months. Cost per roll, about 50 cents. Sarah doesn't have a Costco membership. She can't afford the annual fee. She also can't afford to spend $25 on toilet paper right now, even though it would save her money long term. So she buys a 4-pack at the corner store for $6. That's $1.50 per roll. 3 times more expensive. Over a year, Michael spends maybe $50 on toilet paper. Sarah spends $150, same product, different price, because being poor is expensive. Here's the psychology behind this. It's called the Sam Vimes boots theory. It comes from a Terry Pratchett novel, but it perfectly explains poverty economics. A rich man buys $50 boots that last 10 years. A poor man buys $10 boots that last 1 year. After 10 years, the rich man has spent $50. The poor man has spent $100. And his feet are still wet. Being poor forces you into short-term thinking. Not because you're bad at planning, but because you literally cannot afford long-term optimization. Now, the fourth way is actually about taxes, what I call the bracket illusion. Most people think rich people pay the most in taxes, and in absolute dollars they do. But as a percentage of actual economic reality, it's more complicated than you think. Here's what nobody wants to admit. The tax code is designed to reward people who make money from money. Capital gains, dividends, real estate depreciation, business deductions. If you make money from working, you pay income tax, and you pay it immediately through payroll deduction. If you make money from investing, you pay capital gains tax, which is lower, and you only pay it when you sell, and you can offset it with losses, and you can defer it through fancy structures. Sarah pays 15.3% in payroll taxes. That's before income tax. That's Social Security and Medicare combined. Michael pays the same 15.3% on his salary, but only up to a certain income cap. After that, the rate drops. But here's where it gets really interesting. Michael also has rental properties. That income is taxed differently. He deducts mortgage interest, property depreciation, repairs, management fees. His actual tax rate on that income might be 0. He also has investment income. Long-term capital gains taxed at 15 to 20%, not the 37% top bracket for earned income. Sarah has no investments, no property, no deductions beyond the standard deduction. She pays tax on every single dollar she earns. And here's the kicker: sales tax, gas tax, property tax hidden in rent, license fees, registration fees, court fees. All of these hit poor people harder because they're flat fees or flat percentages. If you make $30,000 and pay $3,000 in various taxes and fees, that's 10% of your income. If you make $300,000 and pay $30,000 in taxes and fees, that's also 10%. Except Michael has $30,000 left over after his basic living expenses are covered. Sarah has nothing left over. The fifth way poor people pay the most is what I call the time tax. This one is invisible to most people, but it might be the most expensive of all. When you're poor, everything takes longer. You don't have a car, so you take 2 buses to get to work. That's an extra hour each way, 10 hours a week, 500 hours a year. You can't afford to pay bills online because you don't have a bank account. So you go to different locations to pay in person or buy money orders. 3 hours a month, 36 hours a year, you can't afford childcare. So you patch together a complicated system of favors and timing, mental energy and coordination, immeasurable hours. You can't afford a good lawyer, so you spend hours dealing with bureaucracy, paperwork, court dates for minor issues that could have been resolved quickly. Here's why this matters. Time is money. Literally, when you're spending 10 extra hours a week commuting, that's 10 hours you can't work a second job, 10 hours you can't spend with your kids, 10 hours you can't use to learn a new skill or build a side business. Michael works from home 2 days a week. He has 2 hours of commute time back. He uses it to exercise, to read, to work on projects that increase his income. Sarah spends those same 2 hours on a bus. But the time tax goes deeper than just hours. It's mental bandwidth. When you're constantly worried about money, constantly juggling bills, constantly dealing with the logistics of poverty, you have less mental energy for everything else. There's actual research on this. Poverty reduces cognitive function, not because poor people are less intelligent, but because financial stress consumes so much mental bandwidth that it impairs decision-making. It's like trying to solve complex problems while someone is screaming in your ear. You could do it in silence, but the screaming makes it nearly impossible. Now, here's what nobody wants to admit. This system isn't an accident. It's not a bug. It's a feature. I'm not saying there's some conspiracy of rich people sitting in a room plotting to keep poor people poor. That's not how it works. What I'm saying is that financial systems evolve to serve the people with money. And when you don't have money, those same systems extract from you. Think about banks. Banks make money from fees and from lending. If you have a lot of money deposited, they want you as a customer. They'll waive fees. They'll give you better interest rates on loans. They'll provide extra services. If you have no money deposited, you're not valuable to them. You're a risk. So they charge you fees to make you profitable. It's rational from their perspective. But the outcome is that poor people subsidize banking services for rich people. Or think about credit scoring. Credit scores are supposed to measure risk, and they do, but they also punish people for being poor. Miss a payment because you lost your job, your score drops. Now you pay higher interest for 7 years. Have low credit utilization because you can only get a $200 credit limit, your score stays low. Don't have a long credit history because you're young, lower score. Meanwhile, someone born into wealth has been an authorized user on their parents' excellent credit since age 16. They start adulthood with a 700 credit score without ever making a financial decision. The system rewards having money and punishes not having it. Here's what makes this even more insidious. We frame all of this as personal responsibility. We tell poor people they need to budget better, save more, make better decisions. And sure, financial literacy matters, decisions matter, but when the game is rigged, telling people to play better doesn't change the outcome. Sarah isn't poor because she's financially irresponsible. She's paying hundreds of dollars in poverty penalties every month. That's money she could save, money she could invest, money she could use to build wealth. But it's being extracted by a system that charges her for being poor. Let me tell you about 2 people I know, Jake and Marcus. Jake makes $35,000 a year. He's smart, he's hardworking, he's trying to do everything right. But here's what Jake's financial life actually looks like. He pays $12 a month for his checking account because he can't maintain the $1,000 minimum balance. He pays $200 a year in overdraft fees because his margin for error is basically zero. He finances a used car at 20% interest. Payment is $400 a month. He couldn't afford a reliable cash car, so he had to finance, and his credit isn't great, so the rate is brutal. His car insurance is twice as expensive as someone with better credit. Same car, same driving record, different price. He rents his furniture, $75 a month. Over 2 years, he'll pay $1,800 for a couch worth $600. He buys groceries at the corner store because it's walking distance and he works long hours. Everything costs 20 to 30% more than the supermarket 3 miles away. He gets sick. The urgent care visit is $150. He can't afford it up front, so he puts it on his credit card. At 27% interest, add it all up. Jake is paying approximately $600 a month in poverty penalties. That's $7,200 a year. That's 20% of his gross income. Gone. Not to rent, not to food, not to transportation, to fees, to interest, to the cost of being poor. Now, let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus also makes $35,000 a year. He's in the exact same income bracket as Jake. But 5 years ago, Marcus got a small inheritance, $10,000. His grandmother passed away and left him some money. He used $5,000 to buy a reliable used car in cash. It's nothing fancy, a 12-year-old Honda Civic, but it runs. No car payment, no 20% interest. His insurance is cheaper because he only needs liability coverage. He used $2,000 to open a high-yield savings account. That gives him a buffer. He hasn't paid an overdraft fee in 3 years. He gets free checking because he has a linked savings account. He used the remaining $3,000 to buy furniture, a good mattress, and a laptop. One-time purchases, no financing, no rental fees. He drives to the cheaper grocery store once a week, saves about $40 a week compared to the corner store. That's $2,000 a year. When his car needed brakes, he had money in savings. $300 repair, done immediately. Didn't turn into an $800 disaster. Marcus is still making $35,000 a year, same as Jake, but he's not paying the poverty tax. That $600 a month Jake loses, Marcus keeps it. He's saving $400 a month, building an emergency fund, staying ahead of problems instead of constantly reacting. Here's what most people don't realize. The difference between Jake and Marcus isn't about intelligence. It's not about work ethic. It's not even about financial literacy. It's about $10,000. That's it. $10,000 was enough to break the cycle, to stop paying the poverty tax, to create breathing room. Jake is working just as hard as Marcus. He's making all the same responsible decisions, but he's trapped in a system that extracts money from him every single month. And here's the really uncomfortable truth. We look at Marcus and say, see, it's possible. He makes the same income and he's doing fine. But we ignore the inheritance, the $10,000 boost that let him escape the poverty tax system. Most people don't get that boost, and without it, they stay trapped. This isn't about making excuses. It's about understanding the math. The poverty tax system costs poor people thousands of dollars every year. Money they could save, money they could invest, money they could use to build the exact cushion that would let them escape the system. But the system takes it before they can build it. It's not actually about taxes in the traditional sense. It's about how expensive it is to be poor in America. And until we acknowledge that, we're going to keep blaming individuals for a structural problem. So let's recap. Poor people pay more through the access tax. Fees just to participate in basic banking and financial services. They pay the credit penalty. Higher interest rates on everything because they're higher risk. They pay the emergency premium, more for the same products because they can't buy in bulk or plan ahead. They pay through the bracket illusion, a tax system that looks progressive but actually hits the working poor hardest when you include all taxes and fees. And they pay the time tax, hours and mental bandwidth consumed by the logistics of poverty. These aren't character flaws. They're not the result of bad decisions. They're structural features of an economic system that extracts wealth from the people who can least afford it. Now, if you're watching this and you recognize yourself in these patterns, I want you to understand something. You're not failing. The system is expensive. The question isn't whether you can bootstrap your way out through sheer willpower and budgeting apps. The question is whether you can find ways to avoid the most expensive parts of the poverty tax while you build that crucial initial cushion. Because once you have even a small buffer, the math changes completely. Suddenly you're not paying overdraft fees, not paying check cashing fees, not turning $300 problems into $1,000 disasters. That's when you can actually start building wealth. But it requires first understanding that being poor is expensive, and the system is designed that way.